All right. Well, again, welcome everyone to the Virginia Governor's Conference on Aging webinar series sponsored by Virginia Housing. We want to thank Virginia Housing for making this series possible. And thank you to all of our presenters over the 2021 series and year for taking the time to be with us, and thanking Dr. Jay White for being with us this month for the December webinar, which is a week early due to the holidays. And thanking each of you for being with us each month and joining us for our virtual conference earlier in the year. And we're looking forward to maintaining the series into 2022. So as always, if you have a topic that you would like to hear about, you have a presenter you've seen before, or a session you've seen in another webinar series, we encourage you to reach out to us and share with us who those presenters are and what those sessions are. Before we get started with Dr. White's presentation, I want to remind you of a couple things. This webinar is being recorded. All of our webinars are available to be revisited on our website at vgcoa.com. We'll pull that up at the end and show you where you can find those recordings. And all of the upcoming webinars are also available. All that information is available at vgcoa.com as well. During the presentation, we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A box. We'll take those questions at the end of the presentation. You can also request to be unmuted and turn your camera on to ask your questions live if you don't want to put your question in the Q&A box and interact with our presenter directly. We also encourage that. That's always fun. So submit your questions throughout the presentation. With that, quickly, we will remind you that this month our presentation is Toxic Ageism, losing a decade of longevity. I am tongue-tied today, I am sorry. Presented by Dr. Jay White, gerontologist and certified dementia practitioner. With that, I am not going to butcher it any further. Dr. White, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you take the presentation from there, because I know you have a decently long presentation. And we look forward to hearing from you, and we'll take questions as soon as you're done.
Thank you so much, Martina, for the opportunity to be here and share this presentation with you. And, I think part of our journey is to come up with terminology that is easier to pronounce. So you are in good stead. I want to share with folks today that, as I shared with Martina just before the webinar, that I am currently in my private practice involved in a situation that is just absolutely germane to the topic at hand today. So I'm a little activated right now, but I'm going to share, de-identified, of course, that situation with you just to give you an example of how timely this conversation is. How is ageism like a virus, like the pandemic that we are living through right now and the pandemic that we've lived through for the last 2 years? For me, ageism and the coronavirus are presenting in a very similar manner. They are both everywhere and they both don't seem to be going away. I feel like we have been actively talking about ageism for at least a decade, but I'm still seeing terms used like silver tsunami and things like that to describe our aging population. Even recently, a group of older professionals here in the Richmond area used that term to promote a talk that they were having. And I'm like, all right, so let's think about this. Why are a group of older white men using a term like silver tsunami to describe your aging? Oh, well, kind of like discrimination on any level, sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia. People have to experience it for themselves before they have an aha moment. So folks from privilege, hashtag people who look like me, older white guys, to be perfectly blunt, haven't experienced the kind of discrimination that other folks have experienced. So that's why we're still talking about this. That is why we're still having this conversation. And I think over the last decade, I've really tried to be generous about this journey that we're on. This spirit about how ageism is unintentional, how these microaggressions, people should really let it slide off their back. And once we know better, we do better. But particularly during the pandemic, we know better, we're just not doing better. So that's why this conversation has been elevated to call ageism toxic. And this is part of the toxicity. This is how ageism spreads silently in accepted attitudes. The covers of magazines, the attitudes that we hear every day, the jokes that we receive in our inbox that are just sort of laughed off or even laughed at. It spreads like a virus silently. But the toxic part is not so silent. It's pretty darn obvious. We understand, we know intellectually that ageism impacts physical health, mental health, social well-being, and it costs us a whole lot of money. We understand this intellectually. But what are we doing about it? We understand that ageism really is a pandemic. We understand that ageism increases our risk for chronic disease. It increases our dependency on society, our own villages, our dependence, and increases our interdependence. It increases our likelihood to think that we're sicker than we actually are. It reduces our recovery from illness. And I think, and others are starting to come on board, that it increases dementia-related disorders. It increases the diagnosis of dementia-related disorders. The idea that pathological memory loss is just a normal part of aging. And as many of us on the call today should know, or already know, pathological memory loss is not a normal part of aging by any stretch of the imagination. Ageism shortens our lives a lot. This is a significant reduction of the study by Becca Levy and others from Harvard in 2002 and again in 2015. Ageism, like isolation, like the social isolation and loneliness that it creates, shortens our lives by upwards of 7.5 years. And with COVID, I think it actually has pushed it closer to 10 years. And let's think about in the Q&A for later why this may be the case. So what I want to do today, instead of looking at ageism like a microaggression, this thing that we just sort of slough off and say, nah, once we know better, we do better. Let's make that direct correlation between ageism and loneliness, ageism and isolation, ageism and neglect, and ageism as abuse, and ageism actually decreasing our longevity. So ageism related to isolation and loneliness. People who experience ageism tend to be more isolated and lonely. 32% increase in stroke, 29% increase of coronary heart disease, 25% increase in the risk of cancer mortality, 50% increase in developing dementia, and I'm going to put a ... there. I'm going to say 50% increase in the risk of developing a diagnosis of dementia. I think we need to work harder on developing accurate diagnoses. A 59% increase in the risk of functional decline, and a 40% increase in the risk of death. This is just a statistic on the experience with everyday ageism, individuals the age of 50 to 80. 82% experience one or more forms of everyday ageism in their day-to-day lives. 82%. And I want to talk about this sample a little bit while you digest the statistics on your screen. This is a statistic, and I think it was about 2,000 individuals, but they're community dwelling individuals. So I want you to think about how these statistics increase or change. I'm going to lead you to increase, but the statistics would change for individuals who are living in the long-term care continuum, assisted living or skilled nursing. So again, these statistics are community dwelling older adults, not individuals who don't have access to a computer, don't have access to take surveys like this, can't get a phone call on a robocall. So again, these are not individuals who live in assisted living or skilled nursing. As we've seen in the past, ageism can manifest, this is the water off the duck's back, the backhanded compliment. I just love how you don't care what people think. That takes a special person. That backhanded compliment, like, oh, don't you look nice today, young lady? That's the kind of ageism that we just sort of let wash off of our backs. No big deal. It doesn't really hurt anyone. Or does it? When we hide ageism in humor, like these cartoons on the screen, or quotes by famous people like Lucille Ball, the secret of staying young is to live honestly, slowly, and lie about your age. We joke about this. What harm does it really create? Especially in these times of COVID when resources are so stressed. Is it really that bad? Well, I think it lends itself very easily to full-on toxic ageism. Hashtags like OK Boomer, the image in the upper right-hand corner of your screen where, dress like a centenarian or dress like a 100-year-old. Is this really what 100-year-olds look like? Well, clearly, that's what folks think. We kind of refer to this internally as age face. We certainly would never do this for any other disenfranchised group, but it's okay to do it for older adults. What I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is the image in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. The current situation, well, the situation over the last 2 years and the current situation in assisted living and skilled nursing. This isolation and loneliness that older adults have been subjected to related to the coronavirus. Let's take a deeper dive into the isolation and loneliness that older adults have been subjected to in the long-term care continuum. "31%. In an October 2021 study, 31% of the COVID-related deaths were people living in nursing homes. 4.5% of the entire population live in a nursing home, and 2% live in assisted living facilities. So 31% of the deaths related to COVID, based on 4.5% of the population who, or 4.5%, yeah, 4.5% of the entire population who lives in skilled nursing, or 2% who live in assisted living. 31%. And let's also think about how the deaths are reported. So when a death certificate is written, somebody actually has to give the antecedent cause of death. It has to be accurately reported. So what percent did COVID actually play in this, well, I guess ultimately a failure to thrive, the ultimate failure to thrive. So let's think about how underreported this 31% may actually be. I'm going to share some very specific stories from a colleague, Judy Nelson, who is a nurse and has been in the nursing industry for over 50 years. Many of you know Judy in her work as a community health nurse, in her work at Senior Connections, and some of her other activities with the Longevity Project for a Greater Richmond. These are stories directly from Judy. Judy, who's had a nursing degree since, I think, 1969. Interestingly, when I was Googling images of neglect in elderly or neglect in older adults, images of physical abuse come up. So that's what we're looking for are examples of outward abuse. I think what we're really looking for here are the examples of internal abuse, the loneliness and the isolation. We argue that neglect is as harmful as physical violence here. I mean, at least you can see the physical abuse. You really can't see the emotional abuse that really is taking people's lives. So one of the real life examples of how ageism relates directly to mortality and morbidity is Miss A. And this is a story directly from Judy. She talks about her client, Miss A, at 84, broke her hip and went to a 4-star rehab facility. She had surgery, went in walking, albeit with difficulty. Over a period of 18 months, she became bedridden, lost a leg, and developed a 4th-degree hip wound that became infected and led to her death. Judy shared that she often visited her and found her dinner tray next to her bed, untouched, and the food inedible. See, Martina, I can't talk either. Inedible. So let's think for a moment. I mean, this is very easy to pass off as, well, it's just how things are right now in stressful times, siloed healthcare facilities, this, that, and the other. But how much of this can we actually change for the better? How much is it related to just an attitude in society that older adults don't matter? Very similar to this situation about Aunt Anne. My husband's aunt was 74 when she began living in an expensive assisted living facility. Within a short time, she became isolated, incontinent, and unable to walk unassisted. Many interventions ensued, including hiring a geriatric care manager who was excellent, but the pandemic put a halt to visitation and things deteriorated quickly. She died of pneumonia that was not recognized until immediately before her death. She had a sacral wound, pressure ulcer at the time of death. Aunt Clara was 92 when she died. She was in a skilled nursing facility that was 5-star rated for rehab for about a month before she died. She was there to recover from a fall. The event that caused her death was a stroke that occurred over a weekend that was not discovered until a family member saw her on Monday morning. The family reported that she was suddenly unable to talk to them on the phone on Saturday, but a physician never saw her. She was taken home with hospice care, where it was discovered that she had a sacral wound, pressure ulcer, and was also bowel impacted. There was no record of a bowel movement for 10 days in the community facility. She died in agony from a wound and bowel impaction. My dear friend, who we'll call Betty, was living with Parkinson's disease in a well-rated assisted living facility when she broke her hip. She had a successful surgery and was admitted to the skilled nursing facility on the same campus where she started rehab. The rehab went fairly well, but the pandemic prevented her family or friends from visiting. Betty began to lose weight. She lost 40 pounds in less than 6 months, became disoriented at times, probably due to isolation and perhaps over medication because of her lowered weight. 5 days before her death, a swallowing study was done showing inadequate swallowing, that she was probably aspirating from food or fluids for months. It is well known that people with Parkinson's disease may require thickened liquids taken through a straw and assistance and supervision while eating and drinking. With a 40-pound weight loss, one wonders why a swallowing study and appropriate intervention such as speech therapy wasn't ordered months before her death. She died of aspiration pneumonia and failure to thrive. She also had a sacral wound at the time of her death. So I also want to share the situation that just emerged with my own private practice this morning. An individual that I've been seeing just a couple of times, though, was admitted to the hospital for a cardiac issue and had intermittent care in the cardiac unit for, now it's been 5 days. He had to call 911 in order to get anybody to come to his room to do any kind of care to help him move so he wouldn't develop a pressure ulcer, to just have any kind of communication at all. So 911, the situation is currently under investigation, but the bottom line is here, folks, why do we have to call 911 to get the care that we need for older adults in the long-term care continuum? So what we're going to try to do today, of course, we're not going to solve this, but we want to remind ourselves about the big why. Why are we having this conversation? We want to listen and pay attention to what our colleagues are saying, because this is not just my personal experience. This is not just Judy's personal experience. Everybody, I guarantee, on this call today has experienced this toxic ageism, either ourselves or a loved one or somebody we give care to. So we need to learn from these other conversations and find out how we can work together to fix things. Does that make sense? We need to pause, listen, and learn. And then we need to disrupt. We really need to fix this situation. During the pandemic, I was sharing with Martina before the call, we haven't fixed it, but we found interventions in K-12, kindergarten through high school, about how to do learning pods and learning communities and different interventions that our younger folks, so that our younger folks can continue to be educated during a pandemic. We reallocated staff, time, and resources. And not to say that it's fixed itself at all. Teachers are still incredibly stressed, but we haven't seen the same reallocation of resources to the healthcare, particularly to older adults. So why is that? Why don't we see the same kind of reallocation of resources on a local, state, or federal level that we see in K-12? I would submit that it's ageism. But that's what we want to talk about in our discussion time. We are seeing some interventions. These are the same kind of interventions that we've seen over the last year, over the last 10 years. Interventions with the arts. These are not new ideas, but their criticalness is new. Looking at programs like, and I want to make sure I got ahead of myself a little bit, but I want to make sure that we elevate and talk about these programs that are trying to keep people connected in the long-term care continuum. Like the Java Music Club, which is a peer support group that's going to be enrolled in 30 long-term care facilities across Virginia. Music as a way to connect us, as a way to increase our cognitive health, our emotional health, and just keep us connected. It's a partnership with Leading Age Virginia and others. I also want to talk about, let's see, where do I have this? It's OMA, Opening Minds Through Art, which is the image in the lower left-hand corner, I believe. It's an art initiative that is going to be, I think, in 142 different nursing homes in Virginia. Executive Director Cindy Paulin has shared some information about this program, and I want to make sure I share a link to that today. But if anybody also wants to put a link to the OMA, Opening Minds Through Art, in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. But these are just some examples that, in partnership with CMS or Leading Age, that we're seeing, that we want to elevate, that these partnerships are helping disrupt ageism. We're also seeing some emerging conversations with infection control protocol that take into account surplus safety. So our licensing entities in VDH, the Virginia Department of Health, and the Virginia Department of Social Services are seeing that ageism, I'm going to call it, has still infiltrated our long-term care communities. So we want to still ensure patient bill of rights, resident bill of rights, to ensure residents have access to family and friends and can engage in informed risk. But we don't know how to do that yet. We don't know how to support our residents engaging in informed risk as a part of these standard precautions. The standard precautions currently isolate folks, but we need to take a deeper dive. We need to reallocate resources to figure out how folks who live in assisted living and skilled nursing can connect even during a pandemic, whether it's for music therapy, art therapy, anything that we can do to support their engagement, because this isolation and this loneliness leads to death. And I don't think that's hyperbolic. I think that we make a very strong case that ageism increases isolation, increases loneliness, increases neglect, increases abuse, and ultimately leads to death. So I'm excited that the Virginia Department of Social Services and the Virginia Department of Health are starting to have these conversations about how to make these increased health safety protocol more person-centered and more engaging. And look more from VCU's Department of Gerontology and the Longevity Project for a Greater Richmond as we have these conversations about more person-centered and more trauma-informed infection control protocol. Because let's also take a step back and look at how triggering COVID has been for people who already have a history of trauma. So this has reactivated folks, and it's also served as new trauma. So we really need to unpack how the infection control protocol has contributed to trauma, but also how we need to reevaluate it to be more person-centered and mitigate trauma. Because we have 286 skilled nursing facilities in Virginia and about 580 assisted living facilities. So while the Java program is going to be in 30 of the skilled nursing facilities, and the OMA, Opening Minds Through Art program, I think is going to be in 140. And Cindy, if you're on the call, or Stephanie, you may want to correct me. We have a ways to go. So we have 286 skilled nursing facilities and 580 assisted living facilities in Virginia. We need to reallocate time, resources, and talent to making sure that the residents of these communities are connected and engaged. Because when we let ageist attitudes set in about all those people over there, because aren't we really talking about ourselves? The ageism sets in. So these were just a couple of ideas that I wanted to share, and how the Longevity Project for a Greater Richmond's 4 pillars of researching, convening, educating, and advocating are going to try to fix this, especially from the advocacy point of view, because we really need to reimagine elder care, not only locally, regionally, statewide, and nationally. We've got to reevaluate our attitude toward aging. We've got to reevaluate where we allocate our resources, because the results of ageism, toxic ageism, are pretty evident. So I want to make sure that we have plenty of time today to talk about what other folks are seeing. Here's my contact information, just if you want to get in touch with me after this. But I know Martina and I wanted to leave ample time to discuss this. So Martina, I am going to unshare my screen and let's start that conversation.
All right. So our first question, I'll remind people to please add their questions in the Q&A box. That makes it a lot easier to find them than in the chat thread. How can we apply what we're learning here today about our residents who are receiving LTSS and remaining in their homes?
Well, I'm glad that there are folks who are receiving long-term care support services and aging in place or aging in homes, because we know from AARP that that is the preference of 90% of older adults. And I think we need to elevate. There's an intervention that we've just done at the Longevity Project called the Thelma Bland Watson Person-Centered PCA School, where we graduated 24 individuals to work in home care. So we need to elevate the professional identity and the wages of home care professionals. Since the pandemic or even before, we saw declining numbers of people who were moving into PCAs and CNAs for an obvious reason, the wages and the lack of respect for the profession. We've worked together with Family Lifeline and Senior Connections, the Capital Area Agency on Aging, to elevate the wage, the professional identity of direct care professionals, because these folks are doing the most valuable, intimate care that is keeping folks out of assisted living and skilled nursing. So we need to elevate wages, professional identity, and the respect that we give direct care professionals, and the accessibility to programs that are free of charge and a living wage.
Great. We've gotten a bunch of questions about the art programs, and some of your other attendees are sharing information about it. But how do we get our facilities involved in the arts programs mentioned? I believe there is somebody in here in the webinar with us who is part of that program. Is
it
Stephanie?
Stephanie? Yeah.
And what I'm actually going to do is maybe if Stephanie's willing, I'm going to put her on the spot. Maybe we can get her to unmute and share a little bit, because there seems to be a lot of interest. Let's see if I can find her on here. All right, Stephanie, you should be able to unmute yourself at this point and turn your camera on if you like.
Okay, can you guys hear me? This is Stephanie.
We can.
Okay. Hey, Stephanie.
Hi there. Great to be here. I'm gonna see if I can get my camera coming to. OMA is available to every CMS certified facility in Virginia through a grant funded in partnership with Leading Age. Art for the Journey is implementing training to be available for every facility that applies. Up to over $1 million is the availability. This training package includes a certification course for 2 individuals at each facility, along with $2,000 in startup supplies. So OMA is designed with best practices in mind, not only from a gerontological perspective, from an art perspective as well. So the supplies are very elevated and sophisticated, and the design is such that it is virtually failure free. And each elder is partnered with a younger person of any age. So it's an intergenerational program. And over the course of several weeks, they partner together, and the resident makes all of the artistic decisions, but has support as needed. And it's really beautiful. It's not only an incredible testimony to friendship, intergenerational friendship, and overcoming isolation, but it also testifies to the power of art and the well-being that can provide. And the art is actually quite stunning. And part of the design is an art show at the end, and the community is invited as part of that. Now, you might be wondering if this is available in the virtual world. Art for the Journey has adapted it to a virtual setting, and we have a demonstration, a site that is doing that here in Richmond. If you have questions about that, I am managing the grant project, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Happy to get you connected with the links to apply, which I did drop in the chat. And if you would like to just get more information, there are a couple of information sessions in January 10th and January 24th. So I'll put the dates there in the chat as well. But if you have any questions about the program or the grant, please just let me know. I'd love to set you up.
And Stephanie, we will also, everything that you've included in the chat, and I'll get the more information from you. We'll actually include all of that information in our follow-up email that we always send out after our webinars. That includes the link to the recording. It includes our presenter information and any other supplemental information that comes out of the webinar. So I'll happily include that with the information that goes out if that's helpful. So thank you for sharing that information with us. We have a raised hand from Dan Coro. Dan, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, so I guess what I was wondering is there been any thought about trying to increase technology to combat social isolation into the facilities?
Yes, we are seeing, for instance, let me think about this. The Community Foundation for a Greater Richmond funded the purchase of iPads for Lucy Core, which is a community in Richmond South Side. So looking at those technological interventions, but back to the PCA and CNA shortage, you don't have to have, but it's recommended that you have somebody to assist with this new technology with the residents. So back to who's doing all the heavy lifting, the PCAs and the CNAs. So yes, there are interventions, but we need to look at them more globally and holistically to make sure that it's not just here, have some iPads, figure it out. We need to make sure that the initiatives are holistic, person-centered, and as failure-free as possible, which means we need that direct care workforce to help implement it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, we have a question. How can we encourage our state and others near us to develop aged living or intergenerational living communities that would provide options to the expensive and often poorly managed ALF communities?
I think this is where we can really engage the faith community. And we've seen in Dr. Bill Thomas's greenhouse model, which is an alternative to traditional assisted living and skilled nursing facilities. I think the website is edenalt.org, EDENALT.org. So we've seen primarily the faith community building these facilities, not facilities, they're actually homes. They're built to approximate, what your traditional aging in place home would look like. A kitchen in the center, a living room, all these opportunities for socialization, to smell the good food that's being cooked. They have a lower, they call the direct care professionals in these communities Shabazim. And the Shabazim have got a lower professional to resident ratio because the residents are encouraged to do as much as they can for themselves. And this gets back a little bit to the pressure sore, sacral wound, decubitus ulcer comment or question that was in the chat about how do we, in these staffing shortages, decrease the incidences of pressure ulcers. And that is just very simply getting the resident, the participant, to engage in their own treatment. Instead of doing it for them, we empower in a person-centered way the resident to help themselves out, which requires more work on the front end. But from a healthcare perspective, it saves us time and resources in the long term. It's a person-centered model. It's more work on the front end, but it saves us time, resources, and talent in the long term.
Do you have any recommendations for the homelessness for the aging community or for those who do not qualify for ALF or NF, which means services aren't being provided?
Yeah, we've been engaging in this conversation at the Longevity Project for almost 6 months. We had a case earlier this year of an older woman who was living in a transitional housing community because she was new to the region. She had a lot of stuff going on, including some mental health issues. And our services are so siloed right now and so stressed. The people who are doing all of the work, again, siloed and stressed. We need to bring others on board. We need to engage our area agency on aging and other long-term care providers, not just in the medical model, but outside. Faith community, other nonprofit housing organizations, Red Cross, Meals on Wheels. We need to connect all of these services. We need to be using No Wrong Door and No Wrong Door Direct Connect. So everybody on this call, I see Martina nodding emphatically. Everybody on this call needs to know what No Wrong Door and No Wrong Door Direct Connect is. It's a service provided through, well, it's complicated, but the DARS, Department of Aging and Rehab Services. So everybody on this call needs to know what No Wrong Door and No Wrong Door Direct Connect is, so we can connect these siloed services.
Great point, Jay. How can we restructure training for nursing home staff regarding dementia and engaging those living with dementia in life? One-on-one care is needed, and over again, we are told there is not enough staff to support my dad's needs. I guess it's a bit more personal question.
Yeah, that's the reallocation of resources. I mean, the resources are there. They're just allocated to other areas. So I would, first of all, other residents can engage in that kind of care too, that kind of cognitive stimulation. So I would encourage that when we're doing trainings in assisted living and nursing homes, that we also engage the other residents, because whether formally or informally, they're not all the time, but they're also engaged in that kind of care too. Thanks, Wendy, for sharing that No Wrong Door information. That's greatly helpful. But you know what? It takes a village. So if we're training the few folks that we have working in long-term care now, why don't we train the residents too?
Absolutely. What do you have any suggestions in what could be done to possibly decrease horrific bed scores during staffing shortages?
Yeah, absolutely. It's engaging the resident, the patient. We don't like that term, but engaging the resident or the individual in their own care. Back to what I said before when we were talking about the greenhouse model, the more that we empower the resident to do for themselves, the less we have to do in the long run. So even, I mean, this is a whole unit on how to avoid pressure ulcers, but making sure that, you know, there's a dry pad beneath the resident that's changed on a regular basis. Or even if there's a way that the resident can change their own pad, or a resident can help, we can figure out a way through assistive technology, a Hoyer, or whatever other kind of assistive device that they need to move themselves. You know, if they have any upper body strength remaining, taking that Hoyer and trying to move themselves, just so they can get some air circulating, or even help, you know, switch out that pad themselves.
There's just a comment here. I think it speaks to some of the things you talked about earlier. It helps to make people aware of their jokes and other cute sayings that they have for other people. Tell them that this is not funny or acceptable. I'm older, and when I hear those things, I always make it a point to explain why this joke is not funny or acceptable. So I think that's a good point to be made, that complements what you've already shared.
It is, but then there's that pushback that even when we push back, you get an okay boomer. Yeah, you're just saying this to me because you're cranky and you're old and fulfilling all those stereotypes. So we need to be prepared and educated on how to push back even more, because that okay boomer hashtag, or that, you know, that offhanded flip remark that we get when we productively push back, is them pushing back that it's still okay to engage in this kind of humor.
Wendy Smith shared a comment in response to your earlier comment about the greenhouse model, sharing that they have a staff to resident ratio of 3 to 10, which is why the level of care is so much better in that model. Many nursing homes have a staff to resident ratio of 1 to 10 or 20 or 30. That in itself prevents the staff from providing the care that's truly needed.
So it's actually a higher staff to individual ratio than, which is part of the challenge, is we don't have the pipeline of educated and qualified direct care professionals. Well, that's just something we need to work on. You know, the Shabazim in the greenhouse model are shown more respect. I hope they're paid higher wages. But if there's a higher staff to individual ratio, then that's not really a great intervention, is it?
Absolutely. I think those are all of our questions at this point. Again, if anybody wants to ask a question live, as you've seen other people engage, you can use the raise the hand, or you can shoot me a message in the chat box. I'm happy to allow you to unmute yourself and ask a question or just share a comment with us. You can also still submit a question in the Q&A box for Dr. White to answer. I think we've gotten a lot of comments about this being a very timely presentation, and that people are very appreciative of this topic and this being talked about. And I think, it's something that we need to be always talking about. And you
Well,
guys
thank
do
you,
a great
Martina,
job of
and,
always keeping it at the forefront. I think you guys do a great job of that. We'll also, Jay, I think we'll also put in here in that follow-up email, some of these other resources that you've shared, because people are asking about them. We'll share the link to the edenalt.org, the No Wrong Door. We do have another question, but we'll share all those resources again, because people are asking about those. If a resident has a severe pressure sore, they're not able to be an advocate for themselves. They're so ill that they have to depend on staff. I'm not really sure what the question is. Deborah, if you might want to clarify, or Jay, I don't know if it's just a comment or, but it's just a comment. So.
Okay. Well, and that's very true. And as Willie Barnes just posted, and she's one of our wonderful partners at DSS in licensing and inspection, it's not only pressure sores, it's falls that are contributing to mortality and morbidity, but also related to isolation and ageism. Again, this warehousing effect where folks are, I encourage folks to research the gray panthers and what Maggie Kuhn, C-K-U-H-N, Maggie Kuhn said about the treatment that many of our elders receive in the long-term care continuum. And it's thanks to licensing inspectors like Miss Willie Barnes, that our institutions are held to a higher standard. So we're grateful for her observations and her participation. But we need to do better.
We had another question come in. Does it help to evoke change by filing complaints with Department of Health regarding nursing home care, or is it just a circular file?
Yes, when in doubt, as we've said in our ISP trainings forever and ever, when in doubt, write it down. When in doubt, report it. When in doubt, document it. And whether that's to VDH or DSS, always. Yes, it does go into a circular file. Yes, there's a backlog, but if we don't continue to report, it gives a false sense of the numbers. So we need to continue to report, but we also need to think about these partnerships and collaborations with other organizations, like our AAAs, that we need to do to, help out DARS, help out DSS, help out VDH, because they are overwhelmed.
Absolutely. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. We're getting a lot of comments coming in, and I think all kind of similar to what we're hearing. And so I think we're all on the same page, which, we're all seeing similar things. And so there's definitely work to be done. So I think that just reiterates why we need to keep having these conversations and sharing webinars like these. And to that point, again, if people have webinar topics, whether it's something like this or another topic, please reach out to us and let us know. I will share before we wrap up, just because we often get asked where you can find the webinars. They all can be found at vgcoa.com. And this is vgcoa.com. You can find all the information about our upcoming webinars here. Our webinars, this is today's webinar. You can always register. Obviously, this one is past, but then you can go to webinar recordings. Today's recording will be posted here by the end of the day. You can see last month's was there. You can find all the information, as well as the email that will go out today will have our presenters' contact information and any other supporting information. as we mentioned about the art projects and some of the other resources. So anything can come in that you need can be found here, and it directs you to our YouTube page. Also, you can always, I will put my email in the chat. You can always email me if you have any questions about the webinar series. If you're interested in presenting or you're interested in sharing a topic or presenter, I'm happy to reach out to those individuals or look into a topic for anybody. But if there's anything else, Jay, that you would like to share with us or any closing remarks, we appreciate you being with us.
But I've done a lot of talking, but I do want to share one final thought is that there is some funding, not a lot, but when we think creatively, when we think about these new partnerships that we need to engage in, reach out to your AAA, reach out to V4A, just reach out and ask the question, is there funding to support this intervention, this partnership, and keep looking for other like-minded folks who want to engage in these partnerships because they are out there, and with enough planning, there is funding. So reach out, ask the question, just don't go back to doing things like they used to be doing, like you used to do them. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today, to elevate this conversation, and for listening.
Well, thank you so much. And per your relation to the area agencies on aging, I've shared the website where people can find all the 25 different area agencies on aging by locations at vaaa.org. That's a lot of A's. There's 4 in that. So thank you for joining us. And like I said, we'll follow up with all this information shortly, and we look forward to seeing everybody in the new year. And thank you so much for supporting us and being with us. Have a good afternoon.